So we're walking in the park in Richardson, Texas, talking to the indigenous environment here, interacting with it, getting our sense of place. There's the signage, a speed limit. That tells you a lot about the culture. Limitations, rules and regulations that need to be externally imposed. You tell me if I'm walking too fast. Do you have like a shake reduction thing? I think down here is probably better because they seem to be turning off here. You know, the trucks?
Yeah.
This seems to be the area of construction.
Well, I was thinking that bench.
Good.
Let's see how the light is.
You got some side light yet.
Drama.
Well, I'm glad you like this place. And they have that little like creek back there, little stream for a stream of consciousness. Oh, nice. Yeah, right down here. Yeah, this is the place that Lori comes to.
Let's just sit here and see how this.
Sure.
Why don't you sit on that side over there?
Oh.
So tell me how you got started doing all this. Actually, before that, why don't you give me sort of a tell me about your childhood. Did you have?
I had no childhood.
Did you?
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur.
I blended it with television programs I've seen. So I'm not sure if I lived in suburbia or in the inner city.
Where are you from?
Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, in our little Italy, on the near west side. I'll wait for the garbage truck to pass. Friday's garbage day in this area. It's really a bustling little area, huh?
Yeah.
How's the background sound with the stream?
It's actually, I didn't notice it until just now.
Yeah, little ambient undertow there. Yeah, but I was brought up in a nice, very nice area where in the neighborhood I knew most of the people, either relatives or we knew who they were and what their relationship was to us, because many of them were from the same village in Italy. So it was kind of like a nice upbringing in terms that I knew our neighbors, and we knew them well. We had a connectivity. And those neighbors who weren't Italian, we knew as well. So it was a different kind of like social upbringing. Next door to us lived a great uncle. On the other side lived recent immigrants who we knew who they were. They had the same last name as my grandmother. So, and then down, 2 doors down, was another family also from the same village. Across the street was a family of relatives. So, and around the corner, relatives everywhere. And everyone was stopping by the house on a frequent basis. And because my dad had some political pull and connections, they would often come to the house. And this is one of my memories of my childhood. They would come to the house and sit and have coffee and cakes and bring their problems to my dad. Paperwork they didn't understand, immigration difficulties, difficulties with their job or the union. And then my father would talk to people. So my father was kind of maybe set the tone in my life of being like a problem solver. The neighborhood problem solver. So oftentimes I'd go home and there'd be 3 or 4 immigrants in the kitchen having coffee who they would bring gifts of liqueur or cakes or whatever, and they would sit for hours and they would discuss. Sometimes they'd be crying. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and everyone became hush because they're talking about something very personal. But that was kind of maybe a big memory in my childhood. My father was kind of like the neighborhood fixer. And maybe that had an influence in terms of how I felt community service was a part of my future, or was just kind of like part of like who we were. My mother was also deeply involved and she became involved with politics. So my family's always been community involved and very much generous in giving. And the sensibility was your wealth and well-being was dependent upon how much you could give. And no one went away from the house hungry, and everyone you did the best you could, with the time you had with them. And that was kind of like maybe a cornerstone of, I think, of what my work evolved into. I think without that, I wouldn't have been as generous maybe, or thought that generosity was part of my reality.
So generosity is something that you learned early on.
Very much so, yep.
And that seems to be, what you do seems generous in terms of your material, your time, does that translate now into sort of your ethic?
It was confirmed, it definitely is very much my ethic to give. It was confirmed when I started working with Alaska Native people and working with them and reading about historically how their worldview and their world ethic was formulated. Essentially, your wealth is how much you can give. The more you have, the more you can give, the wealthier you are. So they measure it almost the obverse of how we measure wealth. For us, wealth is how much we can accumulate. For Alaska Native people and other indigenous people, it's how much you can give. And by giving, you're a greater part of the world. And you're contributing to a longevity or a proliferation of your group. And that's wealth. Your wealth is not measured in your own short lifespan, but it's measured in continuity of not only your community, but the community that surrounds you. So giving to your environment, giving to a thought, a feeling to an animal, or to the understanding and being appreciative of the climate, of what surrounds you, of the spirits, the ancestors. All these things is an interplay. It's a porous interplay, and that giving is wealth, and is really more fully alive, rather than being isolated individual and just thinking of material accumulations. It's about something much greater, a much broader span, much broader band of understanding reality.
Now, you once said in the myth class I took with you that somebody asked you how long you've been doing this, and you said, I think 18 years old. So talk about the origins of getting started and doing this, traveling around the world and exposing yourself to different cultures.
My first travel started when I was 18, and that's where I got hooked on foreign travel. Two friends of mine were born and raised in Italy, and I went back and I spent the summer in Italy when I was 18 years old, and it was in a small town. It was near the small town my family was from, and it was probably my first immersive cultural experience. And I got then we traveled to Italy and into Switzerland, and it was so wonderful that the following year I worked as a merchant seaman, and I saved all my money, and then I went traveling, and I had like $10,000 in my pocket, and over a period of 6 months, I blew $10,000, and I came back with just enough money to have for the subway ride in Cleveland to get back to my parents' home, and then I stayed in my bedroom with the lights low and the rock music loud for like a month, just to kind of integrate what I learned. So I think, and I vowed then that whatever I do, I have to always expand, and that I for some reason I realized, and I often tell students now, that what you set up as far as like how you want to, like your hardwiring, or how your DNA is set when you're younger, is how you're going to live your life. And so when I was like 19, I said to myself, I want my life to be full of expansion. And that expansion is something you have to work at. You can't just take it for granted. And so as a consequence, everything I've done, if there are two choices and both of them are appealing, I will instinctually, I will go for a more difficult choice. And that's the rule. So if there are three choices, whatever is the most difficult, and I like all of them, the deciding factor, which is the one that's the most difficult.